The fluorescent lights in the employment office buzzed overhead like the sighs of people who had already given up. Nina Carter sat curled up in a worn plastic chair, clutching a resume that had gone soft from too much folding. She stared at the job board in front of her, an image as familiar now as her own reflection. It had been 3 months since the art-focused high school where she taught had shut down due to budget cuts. 3 months of surviving on instant noodles and hope, of choosing between her mother's medication or electricity in their cramped apartment. She had no more choices. "You again?" came the voice of Marla, the job counselor, tinged with fatigue and pity. "I told you, there's still nothing suitable for your background." Nina tightened her grip on the resume. "I taught for 6 years. I have a master's degree. I can do anything. Admin work, office support, even cleaning." Marla sighed softly, as if weighing whether to throw Nina a lifeline or let her keep drifting. "Actually, there is one position," she said slowly. "It's for a residential manager at Ashford School of the Arts. Live-in, full benefits, decent salary. But..." Nina perked up. "But what?" "No one's lasted more than 3 weeks." Marla's eyes narrowed. "The headmaster there, Colin Ashford, is unique." The name drifted over Nina's skin like a chill. Even outside elite academia, she'd heard of Ashford, a prestigious boarding school for the arts, nestled in Oregon's countryside, known for discipline, high standards, and a headmaster as cold as polished marble. "They call him the Marble Man," Marla added with a wry smile, "because he never smiles, and he never forgives." Nina let out a small, hollow laugh. "He doesn't hit people, does he?" "No one's proven it," Marla replied, pushing a paper toward her. "But if you need money, if you need housing, if you need a reset, this is the only thing I've got." Nina's eyes fell to the salary listed, $68,000, 0 cents a year, with room and board, nearly double what she made before, enough to help her mom, enough to survive, enough to start over. "Has anyone ever come back?" she asked quietly. "No one brave enough," Marla said, "or desperate enough." Nina thought of her cold apartment, the empty fridge, her mother's voice on the phone, "I'm fine, baby, don't worry about me." She thought of all the days she'd spent merely surviving. "I'll take the job," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marla looked at her, surprised. "You sure?" Nina nodded. "I don't have any other choice." The Ashford School of the Arts sat nestled among tall pines in the northern outskirts of Oregon, where morning mist slid between branches like whispered secrets. The tall, black iron gates creaked open slowly as the taxi carrying Nina pulled up to the main entrance. She pressed her forehead against the window, taking in the gray stone buildings in Gothic style, stretching across the fading afternoon light like a cathedral more than a school. "This place looks like something out of a royal drama," the driver said, half in awe, half uneasy. "You sure you're living here?" "Living and working," Nina replied. Her smile came out shaped like courage, not certainty. The driver shrugged, then helped unload her bags. 2 worn suitcases, everything she had left after 3 months of joblessness, sat before a towering wooden door that dwarfed her entire old apartment. Before she could knock, it opened. A woman in her 60s stood before her, dressed in a crisp white blouse and gray skirt, silver hair pulled into a tight bun. "Mrs. Carter, I'm Mrs. Granger," she said curtly. "Mr. Ashford's personal assistant, this way." No greetings, no smile. Mrs. Granger led her through a massive front hall, sunlight pouring through towering windows onto a marble floor so polished it reflected their footsteps. Every wall was lined with gold-framed paintings, every corner immaculate. "Your quarters are in the faculty wing," Mrs. Granger explained as they passed a long arched corridor. "You'll have your own room, private bathroom, and workspace." They stopped at a heavy mahogany door. Inside was a surprisingly spacious room, with walnut floors, a large bed, bookshelves, and a wide window overlooking the rose garden. "Thank you. This is beautiful," Nina said, amazed. "Beautiful, but don't forget why you're here," Mrs. Granger replied. Your role is to ensure the residence runs according to regulation, strict schedules, no exceptions. She handed Nina a thick folder, heavier than her master's thesis. These are the school rules, 53 directives, including how to serve breakfast, the exact temperature of Mr. Ashford's office, and no music after 8 p.m. You are expected to memorize them. Right. And the students? You don't manage students, you manage space. And Mr. Ashford, that last part made Nina shiver, like she wasn't a manager, but a servant in some Victorian manor. You'll meet Mr. Ashford tomorrow morning, 6:30 a.m. Dining room, ground floor. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Meet him in the morning? Nina asked, surprised. I thought there would be an introduction. He doesn't like wasting time on formality, Mrs. Granger interrupted. Best you're not late, or don't come at all. Before she left, Mrs. Granger turned back. You're the 8th person this year. My advice, don't try to make friends. Don't ask why the air here feels cold. Just do your job. The door closed behind her, and Nina stood alone in a beautiful room that felt like a frozen palace. The next morning, Nina woke at 5 a.m. before her alarm had the chance to speak. She put on the simplest professional outfit she owned, a white blouse and faded gray slacks. Not to impress anyone, but to remind herself, she was still someone of worth, even if she was doing a job no one had lasted in for more than 3 weeks. The kitchen was tucked in a quiet corner of the ground floor, already lit with a cold, clinical glow. Everything was arranged with the precision of a laboratory. Nina opened the cabinets, found the exact Colombian roast beans listed in the house manual. Water heated to exactly 92 degrees Celsius. White porcelain cup. No patterns. No espresso machines. Manual brew only. At exactly 6:30, footsteps echoed down the stone staircase. Heavy, measured, like the sound of someone used to the world arranging itself around his schedule. Colin Ashford entered the kitchen right on time. Black suit, gray tie, not a hair out of place. But what Nina noticed most were his eyes, steel blue, cold as a November lake. She held out the cup with both hands. Good morning, Mr. Ashford. He didn't respond, just took the cup, sipping quietly. Nina stood still, fingers laced together, waiting for something, a comment, a question, even a nod. But there was nothing, just silence. She turned back to the counter, wiping a surface that was already spotless. In this school full of art and expression, she felt like a ghost, unseen, unacknowledged. Not a teacher, not official staff, not exactly welcome, but not turned away either. And though everything around her whispered that she didn't belong, Nina continued working, quietly, precisely. No one needed to know who she was, but she knew. She had come here to survive, and if fate allowed, to begin again. The days passed quietly until one Thursday. The rain started at dawn. A steady downpour soaked the grounds and turned the entire campus into a monochrome canvas. Students retreated to dorms, faculty disappeared into offices. The corridors were still and quiet, like a forgotten museum. After finishing her duties, Nina wandered the ground floor hall and noticed, for the first time, the door at the far end on the right, the instrument room. The door was ajar. A warm, golden light spilled through the crack. She pushed it gently. The room was small but elegant. Polished wooden floors, bookshelves stretching to the ceiling, and in the center stood a grand Steinway piano, covered in a fine layer of dust, as if untouched for months. Nina stepped closer, letting her fingers glide over its surface. She didn't press the keys, just rested her hand, as if listening through skin instead of ears. You play. The voice startled her. She turned sharply. Colin Ashford stood in the doorway, unreadable as ever. I used to, she said, her hand still on the piano. When I was a kid, my mom insisted I learn even though we couldn't afford it. She said music heals. Colin was silent for a beat, then stepped inside. Play something. I want to hear it. His tone wasn't loud or soft, just a command. Like everything else he said, Nina hesitated. How long had it been since she touched real keys? 10 years? 12? She was no longer technical, no longer polished. But when she placed her hands on the piano, a melody emerged instinctively. Smile. The song her mother used to hum while making dinner. It began slow, tentative, then steadied as muscle memory took over. She wasn't perfect, she missed notes, skipped rhythms, but she played with heart, not skill. When the last note faded, Nina turned, heart racing. She didn't know what to expect. Praise, dismissal, or silence. Colin didn't move. Something in his eyes had shifted. "My wife used to play that song," he said quietly, his voice cracked slightly near the end. "Every morning, until her last day." Nina froze, not because of the song, but because of how he said last day, like a final note cut short. He didn't need to explain, she understood. His wife was gone, maybe to illness, maybe something deeper. But what mattered was this: the song had been his last thread to someone he had never truly let go. Some changes are too subtle to name, yet they move like warmth from a morning cup of coffee. Ever since Nina began playing piano each morning, the once cold faculty residence had begun to breathe, not loudly, not suddenly, but softly, like the quiet return of a long-lost memory. Colin never commented on the music directly, but Nina noticed he began appearing earlier each day, from 6:30 to 6:20, then 6:15, always composed, always precise. But something in him was quietly reaching for familiarity, or perhaps trying not to lose it. One morning, as Nina finished Clair de Lune, she heard footsteps stop outside the music room. No knock, no peeking in, just presence. When the piece ended, Colin walked into the kitchen, poured his coffee, and for the first time said, "You play it just like she did." He didn't need to explain who she was. Nina understood. In that moment, Colin wasn't the headmaster of Ashford. He was a man still haunted by the echoes of a love that never left. Their conversations started with fragments. A comment about a dish, a quiet nod to a melody. Then one evening, Colin invited her to walk the grounds after dinner. The rain had just stopped, and the air was thick with the scent of damp grass. They strolled down a stone path behind the academy, where a small lake mirrored the indigo sky. Crickets sang, leaves rustled, and two people who never imagined confiding in one another walked side by side. "She passed 3 years ago," Colin said, eyes fixed on the water. "Pancreatic cancer. We found it too late." Nina didn't interrupt, just listened. Her name was Isabel. She was a piano teacher here. We met during a student recital. She was playing La Valse de Mélie and smiling. I watched her and forgot I was supposed to be listening. He smiled then. Barely, just the soft curl of someone surprised that a memory still held such clarity. "After she died, I let everything fall apart. Ashford became a shell, funding dropped, students left. I kept it going, not because I loved it, but because she did." Nina turned toward him. For the first time, Colin didn't seem distant, not untouchable, just a man trying to preserve the last piece of a world he once belonged to. "This school is the last thing I have of her," he said softly. "If it goes, I don't know what I'd have left." She didn't reply. She didn't need to, because she understood the ache of clinging to something, anything, that stopped you from falling completely. They stopped at an old wooden bench near the lake. Nina sat down. Colin sat beside her, leaving a respectful space. "I've never told anyone here this," he said. "Because they didn't ask?" she offered. "No, because they asked too much." Her laugh came unexpectedly quiet but sincere. Colin turned to look at her. His gaze softened. No longer that of a superior, but of someone real, open, human. After that night, everything shifted, slightly, quietly. Colin began leaving his office door ajar in the evenings. Sometimes Nina would see him reading by the warm lamplight. They didn't speak, but his presence was enough. One evening, he asked, "Do you miss teaching?" Nina nodded. "More than I can admit, but I'm not sure I'll ever get another chance." Colin looked at her for a long moment, then quietly said, "At Ashford, we don't just teach art. We teach people to find themselves again." That night, Nina didn't sleep, not from worry, but from something new. A quiet stirring under the ashes of loss, something beginning. Something alive. Nina didn't know when it started, but she found herself looking forward to early mornings, before sunrise when the house was still drowsy, just to sit at the piano and sense the quiet presence outside the door. She didn't dare name what she felt, but each time Colin entered the kitchen and paused, his eyes resting briefly on her hand holding the cup, her heart skipped just slightly out of rhythm. As for Colin, still quiet, still composed, he could no longer hide it. Each morning, as music drifted from the instrument room, he slowed in the hallway, listening like it was his own private ritual. The music no longer only reminded him of Isabel, it brought something new. Warmth, life, something quietly growing inside him. They hadn't spoken of it, not yet, but in that silence, in each unspoken note and lingering glance, they were slowly moving toward one another, with every morning's melody. Until that Monday morning, spring at Ashford had never felt more stormy. Within just 2 days, the academy spiraled into chaos. A leading education journal published a bombshell. Ashford's internal admissions files had been leaked, including private student data, details of confidential scholarships, and internal communications among the leadership team. The news spread like wildfire. Angry parents flooded the phone lines. Legal advisors showed up unannounced. Some families threatened to sue. The pressure crashed down on Colin like a wave. He spent entire days in emergency meetings, damage control, trying to hold together the reputation of a school he'd been fighting to preserve for years. By evening, a member of the security team handed him a file with surveillance images from the third-floor hallway. The photo showed a woman entering the headmaster's office at 11 p.m. Her frame, her hair, even the familiar beige coat, all pointed to one person. Nina Colin stared at the image for a long time. There was no video, only stills. The woman's face was angled away, blurred, but everything else seemed to confirm what no part of him wanted to believe. The next morning, Nina walked into the kitchen just as she always did, until she saw him standing there, rigid, no warmth, no trace of the man she had once walked beside by the lake. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down her bag. Colin silently held out the photo. "This is you, isn't it?" She took it. Her eyes scanned the grainy image, then looked up, confused. "I don't know this photo. I've never been in your office at night." Colin crossed his arms. "The files were leaked from the network in that room. The time matches this image." "You think I did it?" Her voice trembled. "I think we need to search your room." He didn't answer the question, but that said enough. In that moment, the world around Nina fell quiet. The rain outside, the kettle boiling. Everything went still. "You want to search my room?" she whispered, stunned. Colin didn't nod. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, silent. She looked him in the eye. The eyes that once held warmth now held something colder. Doubt. "If you don't trust me," she said, voice breaking slightly, "then whatever we had never truly existed." Colin opened his mouth, but she stepped back, cutting him off with a look that said everything. "I thought I'd found a home here," she said softly. "Now I see I was only a stranger in your story." She turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her like the final line in a book left unfinished. In her small room, Nina packed in silence. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, but her hands trembled as she folded the sweater she used to wear when she played in the mornings, now a symbol of something that once felt safe. She wasn't angry with Colin, but she was hurt. Because after all the quiet connections they'd built, one doubt was enough to erase it all. On the table, she placed an unmarked envelope. Inside were her staff badge and a handwritten copy of Smile, every note carefully drawn like a quiet farewell. In his office, Colin stood by the window. The morning coffee sat untouched. The piano remained silent. Silence. But this time, it was the kind that followed something lost. The truth, as always, came late, but it came to reveal everything. 3 days after Nina left Ashford, the Academy's network security team delivered their final report. In it was a restored video clip that had previously been blurred. The woman in the hallway security photo was not Nina. She wore a similar coat, shared a similar frame, but when the light hit her face, the truth became painfully clear. Danielle Cohen froze in front of the screen. Danielle, his former assistant and ex-girlfriend from a year ago, was the last person with access to his office after hours. A bitter suspicion crept in. When he confronted her, Danielle didn't deny it. In fact, her expression was disturbingly calm. "I just wanted you to see clearly," she said. "She doesn't belong in this world, Colin. You staged this entire thing just to push her out and try to win me back?" His voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. Danielle crossed her arms. "I was there for you when everything fell apart. I won't watch you throw yourself at some fragile, misplaced little—" "Stop!" Colin stood up, voice sharp. "You don't get to decide who's worthy, and you definitely don't get to destroy someone's life because of your ego." He pointed to the door. "Leave, now, and don't ever come back." Danielle didn't argue. She gave him one last look before walking away. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing the last remnants of a chapter Colin now deeply regretted. That afternoon, Colin left Ashford and drove straight to Nina's last known address, a small rented room near the harbor. But she was gone. The landlady only shook her head and said, "She left this morning. Didn't take much, just her suitcase, a scarf, and a sheet of music she left behind." Colin stood there, hollow, but instinct, that rare friend of the heart, whispered where she might be. He turned the wheel toward the station. And there, among the crowds and cold light, he saw her. Nina, standing alone with her gray suitcase, staring into the distance where no one waited. He walked quickly, heart pounding. "Nina!" She turned, eyes widening slightly. "You haven't boarded yet?" "No tickets left," she said softly. Colin took a deep breath. "I was wrong about everything. You were right to leave. I let fear and doubt rule me. I stayed silent when I should have stood up for you, and I lost you because I didn't trust you enough." She said nothing. She didn't look away, but she didn't step closer either. "It was Danielle," Colin continued. "She staged the whole thing to drive you away. I've fired her, and now there's only one thing I need to ask." He moved closer, his voice steady. "Can you give me another chance? To begin again, this time with all the trust you deserve." Nina looked at him for a long moment. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't cold, just tired, like someone who'd walked too far to turn back, unless the reason was strong enough. She nodded, slowly, firmly, on one condition. Anything. No more fear, no more silence, no more doubt. If you choose to love me, then love me completely, nothing halfway. Colin placed his hand over his chest. All of it, no holding back. Nina exhaled, and for the first time in days, she smiled. "Then let's begin again." And there, in the middle of a crowded station, where goodbyes so often outnumber reunions, something was reclaimed. Not because time reversed itself, but because two hearts had finally stopped running from one another. The next morning, the piano played once more in Ashford's old stone house. But this time, it wasn't played in silence. It was the music of coming home. A year later, Ashford had changed. Not with new signs or grander buildings, but in the way it breathed. Every morning, music floated out from the main studio. Gone were the rigid classical routines. Students were free to write, to play, to express. Some sang jazz on the rooftop, others performed impromptu skits under the trees. Piano notes, laughter, and even moments of silence wove together a kind of life. The very life Isabel had once dreamed of, and the one Nina and Colin now worked to protect. In a small apartment nestled within the campus faculty row, Nina and Colin lived a life no one would have imagined for them. Not flashy, not loud, just quiet and full. Morning coffee she made while he wrote music by the window. Evening walks around the lake in peaceful silence. Two people, once broken, now choosing to stay, not because they had no other option, but because they had chosen each other. That evening marked their first wedding anniversary. Students, teachers, even kitchen staff and groundskeepers gathered in the garden behind the academy. Under soft golden lights strung between trees, the celebration was simple, joyful, and filled with music. Nina sat among a group of students, laughing as a first-year girl played Smile on the violin. A boy followed, turning Clair de Lune into an upbeat swing version that made the whole crowd erupt in laughter. Ashford wasn't just a school anymore. It was home. Then Colin stepped onto the small wooden stage. He held his old guitar and took a deep breath. The garden fell silent. "I'm not great at saying things out loud," he said with a soft smile, "so I put it into music." He bowed his head and began to play. The melody was warm, familiar, yet new, like the whisper of wind through autumn leaves, like the hush of a sunrise, like a gaze that said everything before words could form. The title, Home at Last. Nina watched him, eyes glistening, no longer needing to hide. When the music faded, Colin stepped down. Nina rose to meet him, no speech, just an embrace that said more than any words could. Then, in a whisper only he could hear, she said, "The job no one wanted turned out to be the road that led me home." Colin held her closer. He didn't need to speak because his eyes said it all. At summer, Ashford wasn't just lit by sunlight. It breathed in music and exhaled love.